A year ago last May, I made a pilgrimage to the Kalupapa settlement on the peninsula of the island of Molokai in Hawaii. I went to visit where my first cousin, a number of generations removed, spent the last 44 years of his life. His name was Joseph Dutton, and he traveled there in 1888 to serve patients with Hansen's disease. We might be more familiar with the term leprosy. People who had been exiled to Molokai by the Hawaiian government, never to return, never to see their families again. For me, it was a long journey, and I knew when I arrived, I would likely meet the remaining 4 patients. And the small number of people who work there, some of them serving the patients in the healthcare center, and others working for the National Park Service and also for NOAA, doing environmental work. It's not easy to get there. You have to be sponsored by someone who lives there. You have to file for permits, and then you have to wait to see if they'll allow the visit. But I was successful. I expected to spend a good bit of time alone while I was there, and I did. In the silence, I walked the 3-mile peninsula. I felt surrounded by the more than 8,000 people who were buried there, some buried with stones, probably many more without any acknowledgement. People who had lived and died with a disease that now can be cured. The word that kept rising in my spirit, in my heart, was the word relationship, which took me a little by surprise. Relationship with my cousin, and it's a longer story why I feel connected to him, but also a relationship with the people I met, with the actual land I was standing upon, with the seas surrounding the peninsula, shark-infested, another way they made sure people remained on the peninsula. I felt relationship with the stories I heard from people who were still living there now at the end of their lives with the disease of Hansen's disease. And I felt relationship with God. And not just any relationship, but relationship rooted in presence. While I was there, I discovered a willingness to slow down, to listen, to fully be there. You know what I mean, fully be there? My mind wasn't on other things. I wasn't distracted by other things. There was no television, very spotty internet. There were no jobs that I had to do. There was no productivity that I was responsible for, except to prepare the food that I'd had to pack and take with me so that I could eat while I was there for that week. I was fully present for the week, and I'll be writing about that experience and expanding that experience when my time as you is concluded. Maybe I'll have a book launch here. This week's gospel from Luke tells us the familiar story of Mary and Martha. Martha is doing what so many of us do. She's preparing and serving, and she's managing the moment. She's making sure everything goes smoothly for the guests who have arrived, especially for Jesus. But her sister Mary does something different. And it's especially unusual for a woman of her time. Women would never have sat at the feet of a teacher. That was for men. But there she was. She chooses presence. She chooses relationship. And Jesus must have protected her. I'm sure some of the guys said, she shouldn't be here. I'm sure he waved them off. She sits at the feet of Jesus not because the tasks aren't important, they are, but because she recognizes that being with Jesus matters more than doing for Jesus. Simply listening is what she's called to do. That same choice was laid before me on this week-long pilgrimage. There were moments of deep historical weight, especially standing at the graves along the coast, where the only faithful response was to stop, to be present, and to let the truth speak, the truth of the cruelty and the isolation, but also the truth of the community that the people exiled there had built. There were moments of spontaneous prayer, shared meals with a few Hawaiian folk of Hawaiian descent who had come to visit the graves of their ancestors. There was early morning worship at the Catholic Church, where the congregation was decidedly small, but earnest. Now, each experience was an invitation into relationship, not as something to achieve, but as something to receive. And oh, like many of you, I really like to achieve. But that wasn't the call there. Pilgrimage, at its best, reorders us. It teaches us, like Mary, to choose the better part. Not productivity, not perfection, but presence. And that kind of presence draws us deeper into relationship with each other, with our history, with ourselves, and with the living Christ who still walks with us on the road we travel. Jesus says to those gathered, he says to Martha, the irate sister, is there anyone here who's had siblings that didn't share equally in the chores? Anyone? Yeah. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. The better part will not be taken away from her. That's the gift of presence. That's the invitation of the gospel in a nutshell. And it's available to all of us if we are willing to stop, to listen, and to choose relationship over distraction, presence over performance. It's difficult. We don't have to take a week off of work or other responsibilities as I did, but we do have to find times to pause just to be and just to listen. They can be brief periods, but they have to be just for us, not creating the shopping list in our head or going over the duties of the week ahead or what we haven't done the week before, just being in the presence of God and in the presence of our own hearts. Now, I've heard sermons about the passage today that struggle to accept that Mary has chosen the better part, and I understand full well. We want to defend Martha and the work she's doing, and we can relate to that. And if you're the rector or pastor of a parish, you especially can relate to it. You don't want to harp too much on being present and doing nothing when you need more people on the altar guild and on the vestry, and you need people to show up to volunteer for this and that and everything else. There's this tension. And so most of the sermons I've heard said, yes, we have to be Marys, but we really have to be Marthas. But it's not about self-worth through productivity. The gospel is never about that. The gospel is about paying attention and allowing God to speak to us in our hearts. It's that relationship It's that relationship that causes a transformation that gets us to do all the other things in a way that's in line with the gospel we preach. St. Augustine once famously said, "O Lord, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee." Today, the invitation is to allow ourselves to accept the moments that come to us, the moments that we make time for. Be still for a little while to cultivate silence in your heart, in whatever way works for you, in whatever way works for you. I like to sit by the pond at my house. You might like to go for a walk. In whatever way works for you. And then connect to the presence of God in your heart. It changes everything. Amen.